It is around 500 AD, somewhere in the highlands of central Mexico. A stone avenue stretches nearly 2.5 kilometers through the heart of a city. On either side, temples and platforms rise in tiers, their walls coated in red plaster and covered in paintings. At one end of the avenue stands a pyramid so large that its shadow falls across dozens of buildings at once. At the other end, a second pyramid rises against the slope of a mountain, positioned so precisely that from the avenue it appears even taller than the first. Between them, the avenue is alive. Priests carry offerings up steep staircases. Craftsmen move through side streets carrying bundles of obsidian blades. Families cook in open courtyards. Merchants from distant regions set out goods in a market district that covers several city blocks. At its peak, this city holds somewhere between 125,000 and 200,000 people. That makes it one of the largest cities on the planet at this moment in history. In the Western Hemisphere, nothing comes close. Its name, as far as we know, was never recorded. The name used today, Teotihuacan, was given to it by the Aztecs over 600 years after it had already been abandoned. In their language, it translates roughly to the place where men become gods. The Aztecs did not know who had built it. They walked through the ruins and decided only gods could have made something on this scale. This is the story of that city. The origins of Teotihuacan go back to around 100 BC. The Valley of Mexico at this time is unsettled. A series of volcanic eruptions across the region displaces large populations, forcing communities off land they had farmed for generations. One major eruption at a volcano called Zittel buries entire settlements under lava. Thousands of people begin moving, looking for somewhere to start over. The spot they find sits at 2,300 metres above sea level. The valley is wide and flat, with rivers running through it and enough fertile soil to support large-scale farming. But the most significant thing about this location is what sits underneath it. Obsidian, volcanic glass. When fractured correctly, it produces a cutting edge sharper than surgical steel. In a world without metal, it is the most valuable raw material for tools and weapons that exists. And the valley around Teotihuacan sits on top of one of the largest natural obsidian deposits on the entire continent. Within a few generations, the site grows from a collection of villages into something much harder to define. By around 100 AD, between 60,000 and 100,000 people are living there. It is already the largest city in the Americas by a significant margin. And then the building starts. The Pyramid of the Sun goes up first. It rises in stages, each layer built over the last, the whole structure expanding outward and upward over decades of construction. The final result stands over 65 meters tall. The base covers roughly the same footprint as the Great Pyramid of Giza. Building it required somewhere around 30 million person days of labour. That means 10,000 workers going every single day for over 8 years, and that is just one structure. No metal tools, no wheel, no draft animals. The workers moved millions of tons of earth, rubble and stone using wooden sledges, rope and baskets. The outer surface was finished in lime plaster and painted a deep brick red, visible from far across the valley. Below the pyramid, under its exact centre, sits a natural cave. It runs roughly 100 metres into the hillside and opens into a series of chambers. The builders knew it was there before construction began. They oriented the entire pyramid over it on purpose, sealing it inside the structure as part of the sacred architecture. To the people of Teotihuacan, caves were places of origin and creation. Building the largest structure in the city directly over one was a deliberate statement. At the northern end of the avenue stands the Pyramid of the Moon, slightly smaller than the Pyramid of the Sun, but positioned against the slope of a mountain called Cerro Gordo behind it. From the avenue, the silhouette of the pyramid aligns perfectly with the silhouette of the mountain above it, so the whole structure appears to grow naturally out of the landscape. That alignment was engineered. Running between the two pyramids is the Avenue of the Dead. The name is not original. It was given by the Aztecs, who looked at the platforms and temples lining both sides and assumed they were burial mounds. They were wrong. Excavations have found no significant burials there, but the name has stuck. The avenue is 40 metres wide and runs 2.4 kilometres from the Plaza of the Moon in the north down to a vast compound at the southern end. The surface is paved in polished lime plaster. On either side, platforms, plazas and temple complexes are arranged in a repeating pattern, a rhythm of open space and raised structure that continues for the entire length. The whole city follows a single unified grid. Streets run parallel and perpendicular to the main axis, which is oriented 15 to 17 degrees east of true north. That orientation aligns to the point on the horizon where the Pleiades star cluster sets, and to the position of the sun on specific dates in the agricultural calendar. Over 2,000 buildings across 20 square kilometres, all locked into the same orientation. The city was not built and then expanded haphazardly over time. It was planned. At the southern end of the Avenue of the Dead sits the largest single enclosure in the city, the Ciudadela, an enormous rectangular plaza, roughly 400 metres on each side, enclosed by a raised platform wide enough that 12 temple complexes sit along its edges. The interior could hold 100,000 people at one time. At the back, facing the avenue, stands the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the most decorated structure in all of Teotihuacan. Its facade is covered in carved stone heads projecting directly from the wall in alternating rows. The Feathered Serpent, a great reptilian face emerging from a collar of feathers, its eyes inlaid with obsidian and pyrite. Next to it, the rain deity, goggle-eyed, wide-mouthed. The two figures alternate across every level, row after row from base to summit, with carved rattlesnake bodies running between them, scales cut in sharp relief. The wall does not look flat, it moves. Below the temple, over 200 individuals were buried during its construction, hands bound, laid in groups corresponding to the ritual calendar, surrounded by obsidian blades, projectile points, and pyrite mirrors. Most were warriors. Some wore necklaces made from human jawbones. Others had those same necklaces carved from stone replicas, worn as insignia. This was not just a religious dedication, it was a statement about what the city was capable of. The murals, painted across the interior walls of the Ciudadela, make that statement explicit. Row after row of soldiers move in formation across the plaster, dressed in matching uniforms, carrying weapons, wearing elaborate headdresses. Every figure is the same. Same posture, same equipment, same stride. These are not individual heroes or mythological warriors. They are units. An organised, uniformed military force painted permanently into the architecture of the city's most important ceremonial compound. The Ciudadela held religious authority on one side and the image of military power on the other. The two were deliberately placed together. Away from the ceremonial core, the residential neighbourhoods cover the majority of the city. Teotihuacan is not a city of grand royal palaces surrounded by the houses of ordinary people. It is a city of apartment compounds. Each one is a large, single-story stone complex built around interior courtyards. The outer walls are thick and windowless. Inside, rooms are arranged around the courtyard on all sides, housing anywhere from 20 to 100 people, extended family groups, craftsmen, people who share a trade or a common origin. Every compound has its own altar, its own drainage system, its own dead buried under the floors. Over 2,000 of these compounds are spread across the city. The wealthier ones sit closer to the Avenue of the Dead and have more rooms, finer murals, more elaborate ritual objects. But even modest compounds have painted walls. Even simple households have offerings buried beneath their floors. One compound in the western part of the city, known today as Tetitla, contains rooms whose walls are painted floor to ceiling with images of a great deity figure. In one room, the figure stands, with arms outstretched, streams of water pouring from open hands, jade beads and seeds raining down from the fingertips. The painting is dated to roughly 300 to 400 AD. The pigment is still vivid after 1,600 years. To the east of the Avenue of the Dead sits a neighbourhood archaeologists have named the Merchants' Barrio. The people living here are not from Teotihuacan. The pottery they used, the way they arranged their burials, the style of their architecture, all of it points to origins on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, several hundred kilometres to the east. They have been here long enough to build their own section of the city in their own regional style, and their community persists across multiple generations. On the other side of the city, a separate neighbourhood of people from Oaxaca maintained their own burial customs and material culture while living inside Teotihuacan for centuries. Their dead were placed in shaft tombs, a distinctly Oaxacan tradition found nowhere else in the city. These were permanent communities, people who came from somewhere else, settled inside the city, and kept their identity intact while living among a population that spoke a different language. The obsidian workshops running across the northwestern part of the city produced blades and tools at a scale that supplied trade networks reaching across Mesoamerica. Pottery made in Teotihuacan's distinctive thin orange style has been found at sites hundreds of kilometers away. Ritual objects, figurines, and raw materials moved in both directions along routes the city built and maintained. Behind the Pyramid of the Moon, at the northern end of the Avenue of the Dead, sits a complex known today as the Palace of Quetzalcoatl. This was where the city's highest-ranking priests lived and conducted their rituals. The central courtyard is enclosed on all sides by a covered portico supported by stone pillars. Each pillar is carved with the Quetzalcoatl, a hybrid creature, part Quetzal bird, part butterfly, repeated on every face. The eyes of every carved figure are set with polished obsidian discs. At different hours of the day, as the angle of sunlight shifts, those eyes move between black and bright. The courtyard is designed so that the sun enters it at specific angles, and the carved figures on the pillars appear to change as it moves. The rooms surrounding the courtyard served as living quarters, ceremonial spaces, and areas for ritual preparation. The walls are covered in murals. Painted processions of figures move through a landscape of water symbols, jaguar imagery, and the repeated presence of the rain deity. The floors are polished stone, with drains cut into them, connected to the city's broader water management network running beneath the streets. The palace sits elevated above the Plaza of the Moon on a raised platform. From its upper levels, the entire northern end of the city is visible, the avenue stretching south, the pyramids rising on either side. The priests who lived here had a direct sightline to the major ceremonial spaces of the city and conducted rituals that connected the Pyramid of the Moon to the living spaces of the religious leadership. This was the operational center of Teotihuacan's religious life. The location, the carvings, the murals, and the architectural relationship to the Moon Pyramid were all part of a single integrated system. When the city's population eventually disperses, Teotihuacan does not disappear from the ancient world's memory. The Feathered Serpent travels forward through centuries of Mesoamerican culture. The Aztecs adopt it as Quetzalcoatl, one of the central figures in their religion. They build their own capital 50 kilometers away and make regular pilgrimages back to the ruins, excavating objects from the old city and burying them as offerings under their own temples. In their creation story, the current world was born at Teotihuacan. The gods gathered there in the darkness before time began and sacrificed themselves to set the sun in motion. The pyramids were where it happened. The avenue was where the gods walked. It is part of why the avenue is still called the Avenue of the Dead today, a name that came not from the builders, but from the Aztecs, passed through centuries of retelling and written down by Spanish priests who understood it even less. The builders' own name for the city was never recorded. We do not know their language. We do not know what they called the avenue, the pyramids, or themselves. What remains are the structures, the pyramids, the carved temple walls, the warrior murals, the apartment compounds with their paintings still intact after 1,600 years, and a street grid aligned to the stars, laid out across 20 square kilometers of Highland Valley. A city of 200,000 people, built without metal or wheel, that shaped the ancient world long after it was gone.